Madam's fierce introduction. Wang Yu has been walking on thin ice all his life, and he doesn't know if he can walk to the other side. Until that day, he met the woman on the road with a heroic appearance and a black veil. At that time, she was about to demolish the Dali Temple in order to help an unknown woman seek justice. And Wang Yu happened to take on this case, and the fate of the entire Southern Chen was in a great swing. Chapter 1. Wind and rain force people to stop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Southern Chen, in the 14th year of Yongqing reign, on the first day of June, in the summer of Shaoshu, a carriage was speeding along the official road leading to the west capital, with the clattering sound of horse hooves as full and dense as rice ears in the roadside rice fields. The setting sun is like fire, and the hot wind follows. Wang Mu's robe was already wet and pasted onto his back, looking very disheveled. After running all day, everyone's lips were burnt and drowsy. But he didn't dare to rest easily, because the Ministry of Personnel ordered that the young master should arrive in the capital before the 5th day of the Lunar New Year to report, and he didn't want to delay the young master's promising future. At this moment, a small finger was poked out from the curtain of the carriage and stood upright against the wind for a while before retracting back. Then, a bamboo stick was extended again and lightly tapped Wang Mu's body twice. "Wood, it's going to rain soon. Find a place to spend the night." "Yes, young master." Wang Mu didn't know how the young master knew it was going to rain, but he believed it. In his heart, the young master was a person with great abilities. He could recite books quickly since he was young, and he couldn't memorize them in a day. The young master read them twice and memorized them. Unlike himself, he couldn't memorize them no matter how hard he tried. After becoming an official, the young master has become even more powerful. For cases that others cannot solve, the young master only needs to take a few glances, walk a few times, and lock himself up in a room overnight, and then he will solve them all. Others say that the young master descended from the stars in the sky. He is incredibly powerful. But sometimes the young master would say some nonsense, saying that water must be boiled before drinking, because there are very small insects inside. I used to always talk about upstream of the mountain and Hebei cauliflower, but I haven't seen the young master climb the mountain a few times. Where is Hebei? Is the cauliflower there very famous? Young master, on the day we left, all the restaurants in Jingzhou were decorated with colorful decorations, drums and gongs were blazing, and high friends were all present. The elders of various prefectures were feasting with guests, and several officials in the government office were crying. "I couldn't bear to part with you. Amu, I'm glad you could say 4 idioms in one sentence. But are they reluctant to part with me? That's sending off the plague god." Wang Chong in the car tapped the car wall with a bamboo stick and said leisurely. He has been reborn in this world for 16 years, and it has been a full 3 years since he was promoted to the Jinghu Road prison. With the memories of hundreds of elementary school students who died wherever they went, Wang Chong cannot be said to have made no mistakes, but can also be considered a person who solved the case. In the past 3 years, how many wealthy families in Jingzhou Prefecture have not been kicked open and locked by him with cards and tickets? The smiling tiger put the silver into his arms, talking eloquently and confidently, but what should be done behind his back or what should be done? "I thought I would spend my whole life in Jingzhou, but last month, I didn't know which nobleman in the court remembered Wang Chong and sent him to the capital with a transfer order. It's not easy to live in the capital, it's not easy to treat," Wang Chong whispered to himself as he looked through the window at the gathering dark clouds on the horizon. "Young master, there's a Zhuangzi ahead. Let's go there and stay overnight." Wang Mu pointed to a nearby village and said, with Wang Chong's approval, he pulled the reins and the carriage got off the official road. In no time, he walked to the village. Zhuangzi is a good Zhuangzi, with a water-filled green brick and a large tile, exuding a great aura. Below the lintel hangs a large black plaque with 4 big characters written in gold paint. Qing Shan Bieyuan. However, the two lanterns hanging on either side of the plaque are a bit outdated. A white lantern with a large inscription on each side: if nothing unexpected happens, this house should be dead. Young master, it's unlucky for this village to hold a funeral. Wang Chong jumped out of the car with a bamboo stick and looked up at the low, almost palpable cloud above his head. He said angrily, "If we don't have a place to take shelter from the rain, it's time for us to attend the funeral. Let's go call the door and say we went to Beijing to take office." Wang Chong has been living to this day, but he is very willing to sacrifice his life. Now it's not a past life. Without various antibiotics to protect him, a heavy rain and a cold wind will kill his dog every minute. The rain fell rapidly and heavily, just like urging them. As soon as they entered the village, 3 bowls of raindrops fell to the ground, and then the whole world was like an iron pot stir-frying soybeans, crackling with the sound of raindrops falling. Wang Chong shook the rain on his sleeves and looked around. White gauze was hung everywhere on Chuang Tzu. It looked like it had snowed in June, but it had become a mess under the sudden rainstorm. As a guest, Wang Chong, both emotionally and reasonably, would like to offer condolences for the funeral of the host family. In the mourning hall, mourning flags are displayed, with paper horses arranged on both sides. A woman kneels in front of the spirit and throws paper money into the brazier, while a long burning lamp lights up a bean-sized flame. Taking the incense handed over by Shanhai, the servant of the Shen family, Wang Chong held the incense and bowed 3 times before smelling a strange smell. Having been in prison for so long, Wang Chong was familiar with this smell. This is corpse odor. After a person dies, on the winter, 5th, and 2nd of the summer, the body will emit a corpse odor. Based on the current intensity of this odor, Wang Chong speculates that Mr. Shen has been dead for more than 5 days by adding the coffin to the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Normally, in a family, the mourning period lasts for 3 days and 2 nights. Mr. Shen is almost 7 days old, so why hasn't he been buried yet? I don't know why, but is he waiting for someone to mourn? After Wang Chong finished offering incense, Lady Shen, who was kneeling on one side, slowly stood up with the help of a maid and offered Wang Chong a blessing. The slender waist and willow-like charm attracted Wang Chong to take a few more glances. Mrs. Shen is in her 30s and not very outstanding in appearance, but she excels in the allure of light maturity. Although she is not wearing makeup and has white flowers on her head, she does not show any signs of haggardness on her face. Her eyes are full of spring waves, and she cannot hide them at the corners of her eyes. As the saying goes, if you want to be pretty, you need to be filial. Mrs. Shen's elegant demeanor, combined with the theme of the Lingtang, has a certain flavor of the Undead series. Mr. Xia offers condolences to his deceased husband. Madam Shen, I apologize for bothering you today. Madam Shen lowered her head, raised her eyes slightly, and her gaze flowed slightly over Wang Chong before touching him back. She asked in a soft voice, "My body is full of courage. May I ask which yamen the Lord belongs to?" It's easy to say, Dali Temple. Suddenly, a lightning bolt lit up high in the sky, its winding flash like a tear in the sky, followed by a thunderous explosion that made people's ears buzzing. In an instant, the wind and rain surged, causing the spirit flags in the hall to fly, the white candles to extinguish, the brazier to overturn, the paper figures and horses to sway back and forth, and the howling wind sounded everywhere. The entire hall was as eerie and terrifying as the underground Judge Yan Wang Hall. The servants were trembling on the ground, and Lu Bai was even more frightened by the sudden explosion, causing her whole body to shrink and tremble uncontrollably. With a thud, the plaque with the inscription of Shengong's memorial tablet to the Lord of the Ming Mansion collapsed on the altar. Wang Chong, who had been staring at Lu Bai, couldn't help but squint his eyes. Chapter 2. Chamber of Secrets, Injured, Pen, Ink, Paper, and Inkstone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Wang Mu grabbed the rice in his hand and glanced at Wang Chong, saying, "Young master, you should eat first. Do evil deeds, do not look down on them unless they are polite. Confucius is right." Wang Chong threw away the towel in his hand and sighed in his heart. He had been staring at a certain part of Lady Shen that was too majestic, but was unexpectedly squinted by the strong wind. Alas, before he arrived in the capital, he had already suffered a disaster. It was really lamentable. Young master, who is Confucius? This world is completely different from Wang Chong's previous life. After more than 10 years of exploration and inference, combined with local customs and court regulations, it is estimated that it was around the time period of the Northern Song dynasty in his previous life. Confucius was the old master who used to teach in our town, ranked second, also known as Kong Laoer. Wang Mu got used to Wang Chong's nonsense and said, "Young master, there are still foreign guests in this village who are stationed in the Northern Army." Wang Chong turned his head and asked, "Are you sure?" "Well, when I went to feed the horses, I saw 2 horses with small heads, thin wrists, and thick necks. At first glance, I knew they were military horses, and there was a Zhenbei mark on their buttocks. Perhaps they also came to shelter from the rain like us. This village is a bit strange, Amu, what do you think?" "Young master, you know that I speak lightly, so don't test me." Wang Chong took a deep breath and picked up a bamboo stick to lightly tap Wang Mu's head, feeling resentful that it was not made of steel, just knowing how to eat. "Which bowl is this? Mr. Shen may have died for more than 5 days, but he hasn't been buried. This is the first place. The Shen family should be a wealthy family, but there aren't many servants and maidservants around, madam, and there's only 1 maid left. The rest are all male servants. This is the second place." Wang Chong was about to continue speaking when he caught a glimpse of someone approaching, so he stopped speaking. "Excuse me, adults. Does this meal still taste good for adults?" "Thank you very much, Mrs. Shen. It's quite good." Madame Shen chuckled lightly when she saw Wang Chong squinting her eyes and looking at her. She then took out a handkerchief, dipped it in the corner of her eye a few times, and cried, "Your Excellency, I don't know. My life is hard." Wang Chong was taken aback for a moment. "I didn't ask anything. Aren't we talking about the quality of the food? Why did we shift our focus to your quality of life? This curve seems too rigid." However, as someone else's mouth softened, he could only follow Mrs. Shen's words and say, "Madam, please be on a day of mourning. Death cannot be resurrected, and the old ones will not go cough cough. Madam, please be on a day of mourning." Mrs. Shen paused for a moment, blinked her eyes at Wang Chong, and then began to sob. "I have a deep affection for the master. He went out alone 10 days ago, and I thought he was a friend. 2 days ago, I came to the other courtyard to cool down and wanted to check the accounts in the warehouse. Unexpectedly, when I opened the warehouse, I found that the master had died of hunger and thirst inside. The key to the warehouse was only owned by me and the master. The wind has been strong these days, and I think it must be that wind that blew the door shut. Sir, do you think that I have suffered a lot?" Wang Chong suddenly realized, oh, that's what happened. No wonder the corpse odor was so severe. It turned out that he had died in the warehouse a long time ago, and that made sense. "Sir, I have something to ask for from you. I hope you will show your mercy." Madame Shen is polite, but it's okay to say so. Madame Shen wiped away her already small tears and said, "Your Excellency should have smelled that smell in the Lingtang as well. I wanted to quickly bury my master and lay him on the ground for safety, but the court ordered that someone like my husband who died unexpectedly should have a body grid made by a government official. I dared to ask for your help and obtain a body grid. The autopsy report is a body examination report. The Southern Chen dynasty had a severe criminal law, and it is not uncommon for officials to issue a body examination report for ordinary death cases where a grave worker could not be found for a while. However, this place is not a wilderness, and the county government is only 10 miles away. Why look for oneself? Thinking of this, Wang Chong spoke up and asked. Why don't you ask the county government to issue a corpse certificate? Lord, I don't know. My husband and I have never had a future. I'm afraid that the county magistrate will see me as a woman who is easy to bully. In the future, even if I have a wealth of 10,000, I will be eaten and taken away by them. Maybe even my concubine will be manipulated by them. Wang Chong knew in his heart that he had done this before and was familiar with it. Oh, but to be clear, he was just seeking wealth. There has never been such a thing as bullying a woman before. He sighed and said. I really want to help you, but I haven't taken office yet. Mrs. Shen, who had been observing Wang Chong with her spare light, quickly said, Your Excellency, the reputation of this Dali Temple is well known to everyone in the world. As long as you sign it, I don't think the county government will come looking for trouble. In addition, Your Excellency is tired of being a boatman, and I have brought some silver here as a ceremonial gift. Madame Shen's eyes flickered, and a silver bill was pushed in front of Wang Chong. Is that right? We still need to have the necessary procedures, 100 taels. This price is quite high. Wang Chong casually placed the bowl on the silver note and said, Madame Shen, what are you doing? I have always been as honest as water, solving the problems of the people in the midst of water and fire. I am in urgent need of the people. Wang Mu, why don't you go to the autopsy now? Wang Mu followed Mrs. Shen away, while Wang Chong squinted his eyes again. Upon closer inspection, it was indeed quite big. There is no moon tonight, and it is raining heavily outside. The darkness is unclear, and there is only one lantern emitting a faint yellow light in the other courtyard's warehouse. This warehouse is built entirely of large blue stones, with glutinous rice mixed with egg white outlining the gaps between the stones. There are no windows, only an iron door, and a mechanism spring is exposed on the door bolt. From a structural perspective, as Mrs. Shen said, it can only be opened from the outside. There is a blurry human figure on the ground of the warehouse, which was formed by Shen Ming's body under high-temperature sealing. There are also several pieces of white paper scattered around, with an inkstone, half a piece of ink, and a pen pressed on the white paper, all of which were found by Wang Chong in this warehouse. On the cabinet, various account books were neatly stacked, and Wang Chong was sitting on top of them carefully flipping through them. Having money is his style, and having doubts is his code of conduct. Although Mrs. Shen's words just now explained some doubts very reasonably, there was one thing that Wang Chong didn't believe. He tried to push the iron door, it wasn't too heavy, but if a gust of wind could close it, the wind force would probably be at least level 10 or above. So why did Mrs. Shen insist that it was the wind blowing, rather than someone closing it from outside when Mr. Shen was not paying attention? Although Wang Chong has a bad reputation among the wealthy circles in Jingzhou, no one claims that he handled cases unfairly. This is his golden signboard, a foodie. Since the doubts in this case are as big as Mrs. Shen's chest, Wang Chong needs to investigate and understand. This warehouse has been repaired as solid as gold, and the floor and walls have been meticulously beaten by Wang Chong with a bamboo stick. He did not find any dark room or secret passage, so he can only search for clues in the account book. Just as Wang Chong's entire attention was focused on the account book, two black figures quietly moved into the room, sticking to the wall at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. When there was still one zhang away from Wang Chong, one of the black figures observed for a while and gestured, and the two figures quietly retreated. Who? Just as he spoke, Wang Chong slapped the lantern with his left hand and rolled into the darkness, placing the bamboo stick horizontally in front of him. After a long silence, Wang Chong breathed a sigh of relief and stood up to look outside the door. Am I too sensitive? Two figures curled up in the corner not far away. Shen Ming is already dead, we'll leave early tomorrow morning. Okay, miss. In the guest room, there is a smell of vinegar, which is used to eliminate the smell of corpses. On the couch, Wang Mu's snoring was deafening, and Wang Chong had 2 cotton flowers stuffed into his ears, holding 2 blank sheets of paper and lost in thought. After a moment, he picked up the corpse box written by Wang Mu again, with 6 words on it that left him puzzled. There is a slight injury on the forehead. Chamber of Secrets, injured, pen, ink, paper, and inkstone. Wang Chong knew in his heart that this case was not as simple as it seemed. Currently, it seems that Mrs. Shen is the most suspected, but she cannot be convicted solely based on suspicion. Where is the evidence? Where is the thread of this mystery? Conan, Wan Fu, and Lord D, what do you think? Speak up. At this moment, the window was blown open by the wind, and the white paper on the table was blown everywhere. Wang Chong quickly closed the window and picked up the white paper on the ground one by one. The white paper with the Shen character written on it had already been soaked by the rain. Wang Chong crumpled it into a ball and threw it on the ground. Alas, it's a pity that my good character was not written. I knew I wouldn't write it. In an instant, a spiritual light flashed in his mind. I see. This person is so ruthless, poisonous, and intelligent. Chapter 3. Silent Witnesses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The next day, the rain was still falling, and raindrops gathered along the tiles and dripped down the eaves, as if blocking the house with a layer of pearl curtains. In the cafeteria, Wang Chong and Mrs. Shen had a great conversation, which made her giggle and laugh from time to time. Shanghai looked on from the side with hot eyes and couldn't help but curse inwardly, dog official. Madame Shen held up a golden silk fan and covered her face with a smile, saying, Sir, I don't know if the deceased husband's corpse has been written properly. Wang Chong tapped his head with chopsticks and said, Madame Shen, I almost forgot. It's ready, take a look. As he spoke, he took out the corpse compartment from his arms, but did not hand it over to Mrs. Shen. Instead, he spread it out on the table and pointed it out to her one by one, saying, Look, there are no abnormalities in the top of the skull, nostrils, ears, armpits, sublingual area, perineum, and genital tract. Do you know where perineum and genital tract are? Madame Shen felt nauseous when she thought this was the autopsy report for the body. However, since Wang Chong had asked, she could only cover her face and forced a smile, saying, That's not just those 2 places. Of course, I know. Please don't make fun of me, sir. Wang Chong blinked at her and said with a smile, Oh, you know quite a bit. Look again, there's a wound on your forehead. Somehow, Mrs. Shen felt something was wrong. She glanced at Wang Chong, her face not abnormal, but a pair of bright eyes seemed to penetrate through her clothes and flesh, shooting into the darkest part of her heart. This kind of gaze made her feel scared. She forced herself to calm down and said, Perhaps this injury was caused by her deceased husband being trapped in the warehouse and accidentally hitting him. Wang Chong took out an inkstone from his pocket and placed it on the dining table, pointing to it and saying, Hey, how could it be knocked? It was this thing that smashed it. I made Wang Mu correct the wound, it won't be wrong. Don't worry, we are professional. Smash it. You said the master was knocked unconscious in the warehouse and then locked up in the warehouse. Wang Chong blinked his eyes and said, No, the wound is very shallow. It should have been Mr. Shen's own injury. If you say Mr. Shen is really ruthless, he has to deal with himself like this. Madame Shen asked with a bewildered expression, Did the deceased husband smash it himself? What does Lord mean by this? Because if the body was unharmed, this case would have been ruled as an accident, but if the body was injured, it had to be reported to the government. I believe Mr. Shen thought of this and smashed his own head with an inkstone. Look, it's like this. Speaking, Wang Chong lightly touched his forehead with a corner of the inkstone. There is no one else in the secret room, and the source of the deceased's injury can only be self-harm. The murderer can erase all traces of crime, but cannot erase the injuries on the body. It is through this method that Mr. Shen made the government dare not easily classify this case as an accident, leaving a glimmer of possibility for himself to seek justice. This is the first thing he came up with last night. Madam Shen blurted out and asked, "Your Excellency said that my deceased husband's death was not an accident. What was that?" Wang Chong looked at Mrs. Shen and spread out his hands, saying, "It's not an accident, that's a homicide case. What else can it be? Who is the culprit? Isn't that you, Mrs. Shen? You've been mischievous." At this moment, another thunderbolt flashed outside the hall, and in just one moment, the few people inside the hall were photographed in every detail. Shanghai was so scared by the thunder that he shrank his head. He was completely bewildered. Why did he only work for a while, and the two of them laughed and talked, and his wife became the murderer of the master? Shen Furen seemed to have missed the sound of thunder, hesitated for a moment, and then burst into laughter, as if hearing the funniest joke in the world. She laughed until she couldn't stand up, and Wang Chong followed suit, watching Mrs. Shen perform in front of her. Mr. Wang is really good at joking. I haven't heard such a funny joke for a long time. Yeah, I haven't encountered such a fun murder case in a long time. Mrs. Shen took out a handkerchief from her waist, wiped the tears from her smile at the corner of her eyes, and asked, "Mr. Wang said I am the murderer. Is there any evidence?" "Yes, there is." Wang Chong took out another pen and a piece of white paper from his pocket. "Is that it? Is my name written on it?" Mrs. Shen took a piece of white paper and flipped through it, mocking her. "Your Highness, it's fortunate that you're still the Prime Minister of Dali Temple." "Is that all of Dali Temple like adults?" "Madam Shen, please don't be impatient. I still have a witness." "Oh. Who can prove it?" Wang Chong pointed in the direction of the Lingtang and said, "Here, lying in the coffin." Madam Shen's face darkened with a brush, and she slammed the fan onto the table and stood up, shouting loudly. "Lord Wang, I see that you are a court official, so I respect you 3 times. Today, you first teased me with vulgar language, and now you slander me. What is the purpose? If I don't explain clearly, even if I lose my life, I will go to Dali Temple to sue you." "Oh, Mrs. Shen, you're chatting so happily. Why are you so anxious?" Wang Chong pulled Mrs. Shen's sleeve, pulled her back to the stool, put a spring rolls in the plate for her, and said, "You should listen to me first. It's not too late for you to sue me if I'm wrong. That concubine is all ears and ears to the adult's opinions." Wang Chong took a leisurely drink of congee and a mouthful of pickles. After carefully chewing and swallowing, he said slowly, "Shen Ming injured himself, which means he knew that the door was closed. In order to prevent himself from being considered an accident after death, he injured himself. Madam Shen and I should have reached a consensus on this. Then let's talk about another doubtful point. There are all kinds of pens, ink, paper, and inkstones in the warehouse, and Shen Ming could have written down the killer's name, but why didn't he write it?" Madam Shen glanced at Wang Chong and shook her fan, saying, "I didn't know that. Maybe the master doesn't know who the culprit is, or maybe the culprit is masked. Even if we don't know who the culprit is, at least men and women, height, and weight can be written. There's no such thing as writing a suicide note. Since I haven't written anything, why do adults say I'm the murderer?" Wang Chong spread a piece of white paper on the table and explained to Mrs. Shen. "Because Madam was the first to discover the body." "I don't understand. Let me tell you again. Shen Ming knows who closed the door from outside, and he also knows that after his death, no matter what he wrote, whether it was his name or hint, if there was something on this piece of paper, even if he drew a turtle, this person would definitely quickly open the warehouse and destroy the evidence. Therefore, Shen Ming simply didn't write anything and only left a few blank sheets. He did this to tell us that whoever can open the warehouse is the culprit. Yesterday, Madam told me that only you and Mr. Shen have the keys to this warehouse. This is the second and most crucial trick that Wang Chong came up with last night in this case, which is why Shen Ming didn't write the name of the murderer on paper since he knew he was locked in the warehouse. Wang Chong couldn't figure it out until he personally threw the piece of paper he had written into the basket. Sometimes writing is for nothing, not writing is actually writing clearly. At this moment, Wang Chong had already solved the case completely and clearly. He stared at Mrs. Shen, wanting to see if she had anything else to say. Mrs. Shen's face showed no signs of panic, and she spoke slowly, as if recalling a trivial event in her past life. However, tears from the corners of her eyes betrayed her and dripped down her cheeks. Alas, when I opened the warehouse that day, I was still wondering why that old man didn't write down my name. I thought it was because he couldn't bear it, but now I think about it, it's still because I made it easy for him. He wouldn't let me go even if he died. I'm not afraid of adults' jokes. I married into the Shen family at the age of 18 and I'm still a virgin. It's been a tough night. After sighing, Mrs. Shen shook her fan and said calmly, Your Highness, how about making an accident? If Your Highness is willing to let me go, I am willing to offer this Shen family property with both hands, as well as the perennial valley path that Your Highness mentioned. I will also give you my concubine's body. Wang Chong glanced at Shen Hai and awkwardly said, in broad daylight, Come on, there are still people. Sir, it's okay. Mrs. Shen made a graceful motion of wiping her neck with the fan horizontally, but Shen Hai saw two waves of war and the crotch was damp and hot. Wang Chong looked up, sighed, and regretfully said. Ah, I'm a person. I'll definitely help you with things if I take your money. I also quite like your flesh, but it's natural. There's nothing I can do. At this moment, Wang Mu, dressed in a raincoat, walked in with a green-robed official from Zhaozuiyuan.com. He was called out by Wang Chong early in the morning and went to the Shuyang County government to call for help. Now it was the right time to arrive. Sir, the people from Shuyang County have arrived. In the afternoon, the rain stopped. Wang Chong sat on the carriage, holding his chin and squinting as the Yamen officials in Shuyang County pasted seals on the doors of other courtyards. Ah Mu, have they memorized Mrs. Shen's testimony and Shen Hai's testimony? It's all written, and both of them have already signed up. Young master, what crime will Lady Shen be sentenced to? Wang Chong took the confession of the two and looked at it. The bamboo stick in his hand rhythmically tapped the bottom of the carriage, and he said softly, according to Chen's law, a wife who kills her husband is a great crime of human ethics, and there is no forgiveness. It will be executed. At this moment, a carriage stopped by Wang Chong's side, and a Yamen runner lifted the curtain to reveal Lady Shen kneeling inside. Although heavily shackled, Lady Shen had no hint of sadness on her face. Instead, she smiled at Wang Chong and said, I don't know your name yet. Can you tell me? I will gather some soil in prison as incense, kowtow daily, and recite sutras and pray for you. Wang Chong waved his hand to stop Wang Mu and said to Mrs. Shen, My surname is Wang Mingchong. If you want to curse, curse. However, you may be disappointed because my whole family has died long ago and it's not your turn. In Mrs. Shen's stunned state, Wang Chong waved his hand and said to the Yamen attendant beside the car, Let's go. Don't make things difficult for her. This case will be re-investigated by the Dali Temple. If I know she wasn't a virgin at that time, I won't spare you. Your Highness, 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 Your Highness. Mrs. Shen's kowtow and shouting followed the carriage away. Wang Chong tapped Wang Mu with a bamboo stick and said, AMU, let's go. Chapter 4. The Fierce County Lord. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, 2 days later, a majestic city appeared in Wang Chong's sight. Xijing, after 800 years of wind and rain, still stands steadfastly at the center of the empire. Nowadays, the western capital city is even more bustling, with various shops and shops lined up in rows. The roads are constantly bustling with cars and horses, and people flow on both sides. On the street, there are people selling various foods and trinkets, those selling herbal tea, those shouting turtles wearing hats and selling mint cakes, as well as those selling chilled fruits and snow-soaked drinks. The cries of various vendors keep coming and going. Young master, chilled sour plum soup. Buy. Young master, lotus fragrance dew. Buy. Young master, orange brewed crab. That's expensive, obedient. We won't buy it. The two of them ate along the way, and the carriage gradually turned from the bustling Xiang Avenue into a small alley called Jinchai Bag Lane, and then stopped in front of a house. The house is not big, with only 2 entrances, but unlike elsewhere, there is a pomegranate tree growing in the yard. Just after the pomegranate moon has passed, the orange pomegranate flowers have not shown signs of decline, blossoming one after another, as if red stitches are densely falling on the green silk cloth. An elderly man with gray hair was hunching his body, dragging a bamboo broom to sweep the few fallen leaves in the courtyard. Wang Chong jumped off the car and exclaimed excitedly, "Ma Bo!" The old man hesitated and turned his head, looking at the 2 young people in front of him. His cloudy eyes shone brightly, and he threw down his broom. He exclaimed in uncertainty, "Young master, young master." Wang Chong ran 2 steps quickly, supported the old man's arm, and nodded incessantly, Ma Bo, I'm Xiao Chonger, he's AMU. The old man straightened up and stretched his neck to carefully examine Wang Chong's face. Suddenly, he burst into tears and said, "Third young master, it's really you. It's been 15 years, and you've come back." This is Wang Chong's ancestral house, his first home after being reborn. After the release of longing for each other, Wang Chong asked Ma Bo to take Wang Mu to put his luggage. He stayed alone inside, staring blankly at the pomegranate tree in the yard. The sunlight slanted into the house, and past memories were like dust lost in the light, enveloping Wang Chong in clusters. Third, don't pick any more. Second, and I can't hold on anymore, just pick that one, the largest one. Yaoer, come over quickly. Grandma has brought you your favorite caramel. Come and eat it behind Grandma. After finishing it, go out. Boss, I'm going to marry a big but daughter.in.law in the future. They said that a big but daughter.in.law is easy to have children with. Chonger, did you know how to memorize what you were asked to memorize yesterday? When will you be able to succeed like this? Extend your hand, however, no matter how strong the wind of longing is, it cannot bring the longing for family members. We can only take a walk around the yard and then go to the places we have been to before. Wang Chong withdrew his thoughts from his memories and turned to look at the 6 plaques placed in the room. Those are his grandmother, parents, brothers and sisters. Looking at the unnamed plaque in the middle, Wang Chong asked softly, "Is it worth it?" It has been 15 years since Wang Chong wanted to ask this question, but he has never had the chance. Today, he went home, so he needs to ask carefully. Is rebellion worth it? 15 years ago, when the former emperor moved to Gongquan Palace, the deposed crown prince impersonated the imperial edict and mobilized troops to besiege Xinjia. As a result, he was repelled by the current emperor, the second prince, and the front guard of the palace. The defeated crown prince was demoted to a commoner and imprisoned on the island of Xian, while Wang Chong's father, Wang Mingluan, as the crown prince's confidant, was executed by the entire family. Do you know how much harm that experience caused to Wang Chong, who had only been in this world for a year at that time? Others can't forget even a big joke, but what they have encountered is a complete massacre. That night, Wang Chong was filled with longing for a new life, struggling whether he was going on the path of invention and creation or the path of a prodigal son who copied some poetry and slept with the courtesans. When he was kicked open by the ferocious imperial army, he was taken out of his warm bed, gagged, bound up in a prison car, and thrown into a dark prison. Along with him, he also encountered his grandmother, mother, elder brother, second brother, and sister. If it weren't for the last act of the late emperor, Wang Chong would have become a name on these plaques now. In the past decade or so, Wang Chong has also learned some insider information about this case through various channels. Some people say that the late emperor suspected the crown prince and forced him to take action first, while others say that the crown prince strongly advocated for military action against Northern Qi. The late emperor only wanted to be partial, so the crown prince launched a military admonition. But no matter what speculation, one thing is certain. The evidence of the crown prince's rebellion is conclusive, and hundreds of imperial guards witnessed the crown prince raising his sword to command the rebels to besiege the imperial palace. Additionally, Wang Mingluan personally admitted that the imperial edict was forged by him. So, it is not unjustified to have a whole family plagiarized. Wang Chong did not come back this time to overturn the case for Wang Mingluan. This kind of thing is only about the outcome. If it succeeds, even if you only want to taste the taste of the imperial concubine, no one dares to say you. If it fails, even if you try to make up for it, it will be a death. He just wanted to ask his father, who had only been with him for a year, if it was worth it to sacrifice the lives of his entire family for his own glory and wealth. Not talking. You don't think it's worth it, do you? Wang Chong stood up from the altar and raised a bamboo stick to poke Wang Mingluan's memorial tablet with a loud bang, causing the tablet to fall off the altar. The whole family died because of you, and you deserve to stand with your grandmother and mother. You think so? Wang Chong felt a refreshing feeling as he walked out of the room. He stretched lazily, looked at the sky, and muttered to himself, "Live, find the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com and climb up the position of the Grand Priest." Today is already the 4th day of the Lunar New Year, and it is the last day for the Ministry of Personnel to report. If you miss today, you will have to wait for another 3 months. Wang Chong tidied up the room a bit and then took Wang Mu out the door. As soon as the two of them walked onto Xiang Avenue, they saw a group of people coming towards us not far away with a grand appearance. At the forefront was a woman dressed in strong attire, with a long sword on her waist and a thin veil on her head, accompanied by a charming maid and a woman with a sorrowful face. Wang Chong quickly pulled Wang Mu aside. There were probably more Wang Ba in the moat of the capital than him, a 6th-rank official. If anyone was hit, there would be no place to argue. Waiting for 3 women to pass by, Wang Chong tiptoed and glanced again. This little girl's skin looks a bit fierce, but her buttocks are quite perky. "Young master, I think that maid is pretty." "What do you know?" Women can't just look at their faces, they need to look at their inner selves. The maid has no hand feel on both sides, amu. Wang Chong reluctantly withdrew his gaze and casually asked the nearby merchant, shopkeeper, "What are they doing here?" "Oh, there was an unfounded case the day before yesterday." The prisoner refused to admit his guilt and kept shouting his grievances. He caused trouble several times, and the Dali Temple no longer accepts his family's lawyers. Later, the lady of this family somehow found the county head. Isn't that why the county head is going to demolish the Dali Temple now? I want to ignore the stall and join in the fun. TSK, what a fierce county lord. Even Dali Temple dares to be demolished. Wang Chong sighed and suddenly regained his senses. His heart trembled as he pulled Wang Mu to catch up and said, "Let's go, hurry up." "Young master, I want to buy a cup of sour plum soup." "Buy it, sir. Our Dali Temple is about to be demolished." Chapter 5. If I say I want to review, I want to review. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The Dali Temple in the east of Shijing City was the primary judicial center of the Southern Chen dynasty, responsible for the review of cases in various prefectures and counties throughout the country, as well as the trial of serious, major, suspicious, and difficult cases. Now, the gate of Dali Temple is tightly closed, and the 2 Bayan stone statues that were once divine and majestic appear listless. The county lord, wearing a veil, stood silently and solemnly at the door, while the delicate maid shouted to a judge dressed in a green robe at the Dali Temple. The county lord said, "Let the magistrate of Dali Temple come out to take over the case. This evaluation has its ups and downs that cannot be said. Who would have thought that it would happen if it were my turn to be on duty today?" With a drooping face, I replied, "Mr. Zhou has gone into the palace and hasn't come back yet." "What about Xiang Shaoqing? He can come out as well." "Xiang Shaoqing has also entered the palace and has not returned." The delicate maid heard him say this and stomped her foot anxiously. "Is there no one left in your Dali Temple?" "How could there be no one in such a large Dali Temple? It's just hiding behind the gate now." Zhou Lai, the magistrate of Dali Temple, and Xiang Zhong, the magistrate of Shaoqing, walked hand in hand with a worried expression on their faces. "Mr. Zhou, what should we do?" "Xiang Shaoqing, please hold on here for a while I enter the palace to find the emperor." "Sir, there's no time for this. I'm afraid you'll come back later and she'll even dismantle me." "Mr. Xiang, as long as you hold on, there will be a way out." "I have wronged you." Xiang Zhongyan rolled his eyes and listened. "Are you talking in human language? You, as a 9 Qing, are hiding like this. Can I, as a young Qing, withstand it?" "Who is Zhao Tong'er, the head of Pinyin County?" "She is the apple of the eye of the military tycoon Jinbei Marquis and the legitimate niece of Empress Dowager Da, the official in the harem. If she really wants to demolish her, I have to fight her with a smiling face. Do you believe it or not? Let's give it a try." "Ener, you step down, I'll talk to him." Zhao Tong'er walked up and said loudly, "There is a record in Chen LV that the deceased should be retried if they cry out for injustice. The Dali Temple is in charge of all the punishments and prisons in the world, based on the law. Why didn't you take on Ching Su's case?" The commentator explained with a mournful expression, "County Lord, this case has gone through a second trial by the county and government, and we have carefully investigated the confession and physical evidence. This case is as solid as a mountain of evidence. Is it difficult for him to keep shouting injustice, so we will keep trying." Chen Lufshang also said that if the evidence is conclusive, if the person is found guilty and does not admit it after the re-investigation of Dali Temple, it can be omitted. Zhao Tong'er sneered and said, The evidence is as solid as a mountain. I ask you, have you found the head of this case?" "County Lord, the deceased in this case has been claimed by someone, but their head cannot be found. There is no involvement in this case." "No involvement. Your Majesty has said many times that when it comes to matters concerning human life and the heavens, one should be both cautious and cautious. Every autumn judgment, Your Majesty only selects 2 or 3 out of 10. You are kind. If there is incomplete physical evidence, the case will be decided, and if you shout for justice, you will not be tried. Today, I brought someone to deliver a memorial. You don't even have anyone to pick you up. You have such great authority. I dare not think Zhao Tong'er would dare to open the door of your Dali Temple. The people in the capital are already beautiful and lively." When the county lord said this, he immediately started talking about something wrong with Dali Temple. The whole crowd approached the main entrance of Dali Temple step by step with the county lord. The Yamen officials dared not stop the county lord, so they could only stand in a row with water and fire sticks, pushing and shoving with the people, creating a chaotic scene. The judge looked at Zhao Tong'er, who was already drawing his sword, as he stepped back and wiped the beads of sweat on his head. He secretly complained to himself, "Your Excellency, if you don't come out again, this ant will really take action. I can't stop her." Zhou let out a mournful sigh, straightened his clothes, took a step back, and now that things have come to an end, let's dismantle them. The old won't go, the new won't come. Wang Chong mixed in with the crowd and listened to the situation carefully. He thought to himself, this won't work. The face of Dali Temple will be ruined. So he poked Wang Mu with a bamboo stick and whispered, "Let's go, AMU, hurry up." "Let's go, sir." You have to take care of this. Wang Chong lowered his voice and said, at this moment, what are you calling adults and what do you care about? Is this something I can manage? Shoot the bird at the head with a gun, and the rafter at the head will rot first. Don't worry about your own business, eat 3 bowls of rice. So many sages are trying their best to tell us one thing. Mind your own business. And the evaluation just now was very clear. The Dali Temple in this case has been resurveyed without a doubt, and the evidence is as solid as a mountain. I don't know why the county lord probably came over after hearing someone else's one-sided words. What did Wang Chong do when he got close and was beaten by this little girl's skin? He was about to pull Wang Mu away quietly when a man beside him who heard the two of them talking loudly shouted, "There's an official here. He said he'll take on this case." Wang Chong is so angry in his heart. He really wants to hit this person's teeth with a stick, and they don't care about you. What kind of presents do you have? When did my special mother say she took it? What is your name and where do you live? Can you get married? The lady is so beautiful, be careful not to let me smash your window at night. Hey, who pushed me? Don't push me. Zhao Tong'er turned her head and saw a young man being pushed out of the crowd, with a crooked bun, disheveled clothes, and a missing shoe. Holding a bamboo stick, she looked disheveled, and couldn't help but chuckle. Take a closer look, it's him. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Ping Shi's face darkened and he shouted loudly, "Where are you from? You dare to take on the case for Dali Temple?" Wang Chong thought to himself that since he had been pushed out, he should settle the matter first and leave a good impression on the new unit. So he took out a confession from his pocket and handed it over to the evaluator. Upon reviewing the matter, I breathed a sigh of relief in my heart. Finally, someone tall came to my aid. It was better to die than to die from my superiors. So I said to the County Lord, this Wang is the new abbot of our temple. He has solved numerous major cases in the local area and has solved them like a god. You can find him. As he spoke, he made a gesture of invitation with his right hand. Come, Mr. Wang, please start your performance. Wang Chong thought to himself, Nima, you are blowing me to death like a conch, but it's too late for him to leave now. So, Wang Chong held on to his hair bun and shouted to the onlookers, Dali Temple is the authority of the court. Today, you are besieging Guanxia with the intention of attacking the government office. Do you really think that the court's laws and regulations are decorations? Don't think that the law does not hold the people accountable. Everyone should step back, and then step back a bit. The onlookers listened to Wang Chong's words and took a few steps back, leaving a large area of space at the door. Upon seeing the situation, Zhao Tong'er stood up and said, Don't show off your authority here. I'll ask you, is it wrong for Cheng Su to be unjustified and seek justice? Wang Chongqiao and Zhao Tong'er clasped their fists and said with a worried expression. County Lord, you only know one thing but not the other. According to Chen's law, if the deceased is sentenced to be wronged, a retrial should be conducted. This is a matter of cautious killing, but it is not a case of not killing. It is only natural for a person to pay homage, and shouting a word of injustice can save them from death. How could there be such a good thing in the world, right? You are not wrong in seeking justice, but whose justice is this justice? Is it the justice of the suspect or the justice of the bitter master? Zhao Tong'er blurted out, Of course it's the justice of the suspect. As soon as I spoke, I suddenly realized something was wrong. Is the suspect fair? Just as she was about to add, I also came to seek justice from the Lord. Wang Yu stopped giving her a chance and said first. The county lord came to seek justice from the suspect, but where did the bitter lord seek justice? Today, the suspect didn't want to die, so he came to the yamen to seek justice. So, where did the murdered person and those relatives and friends who were devastated by their departure go to seek justice? The life of the suspect is life, and the life of the deceased is even more life. They cannot die in vain. Today, the suspect called out for justice, and the county lord came to demolish my Dali Temple. So tomorrow, the bitter lord will also come to call out for justice. Can they also go to demolish the county lord's house? County lord, do you think what I said is true? Zhao Tong'er was immediately confused by the series of questions that Wang Chong kept circling around, and she began to doubt herself. He makes some sense. I called out for the suspect to come and demolish Dali Temple, so it seems that the family of the deceased's family called out for justice to come and demolish my house. I demolished Dali Temple to seek justice, and they also demolished my house to seek justice. Well, it makes sense, so who doesn't make sense? No, let me clarify. I came to demolish Dali Temple because Cheng Su kept complaining and Dali Temple did not have a retrial. If Cheng Su was exonerated and the deceased's family kept complaining, would Cheng Su be arrested again? Then Cheng Su would complain and be released, and his family would shout again. Oh, why is it getting more and more chaotic? My head is so itchy and I really want to scratch. She was about to ask Qing'er to help her figure out what was wrong, but when she turned her head, Qing'er looked even more stunned, with her hair bun almost unraveling. The people also found Wang Chong's words very reasonable. What this adult said makes sense, it makes sense. Yeah, Wuda, you said if I kill you and then shout wrongly, wouldn't I also be okay? Shiman, is your special mother trying to harm me? I already thought you were flirting with Jinlian. As they chatted, the two of them got into a fight. Zhaozuyuan.com Wang Chong looked at Zhao Tong'er wearing thin gauze and remained silent. Knowing that he had temporarily intimidated her, he exclaimed in his heart that he was lucky. Presumption of guilt and presumption of innocence, procedural justice and outcome justice, who is more important between the right to life of suspects and the right to life of the deceased? Over the past 1,000 years, how many legal professionals have turned their minds into dogs and even said they can't fool you? My mind is buzzing. Before Zhao Tong'er could fully recover, Wang Chong quickly said. Of course, the county head is known for his advocacy for the people, his eagerness for justice, and his low-ranking officials also greatly admire him. I can also understand that the county head has some extreme behavior. Dali Temple has always spared no bad person and never wronged a good person. We will definitely conduct a retrial of this case with a highly responsible attitude towards life, making the case clear and revealing to the world. County Lord, please go back. Let's just leave if there's nothing else. Before Zhao Tong'er could recover, she mechanically said, oh, good. Done. Wang Chong clapped his hands, held the paper in his hand, and turned around wanting to leave. County Lord, are you going to make decisions for my husband? At this moment, Qi Rong, who had been using soy sauce all the way, let out a mournful cry and woke up Zhao Tong'er. Stop, I almost got fooled by your sharp teeth and sharp mouth. What if you hastily handle it? I need to review it with you. Judge you, damn it. Wang Chong let out a sigh in his heart and opened his hand, saying, County Lord, Dali Temple is a place of justice. Women are not allowed to enter unless they are involved in a case. This is a rule. I said, if you want to review, you need to review. Don't try to be slippery. Believe it or not, at this moment, someone shouted loudly, if it can be reviewed, the Lord of Ping'an County said that it will definitely be reviewed. Looking back at the review, Lord Zhou and Xiang Shaoqing, you two have finally agreed to come out. What a coincidence. Chapter 6. No problem cases. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, County Lord, Marquis's health is quite good. Not bad, thank you for your concern, Mr. Zhou. The County Lord has the demeanor of a marquis, he hates evil as if he were an enemy, and is heroic and valiant. No, it's just a simple matter. In the official room of Dali Temple, Wang Chong listened to the conversation between Zhou Lai and Zhao Tong'er, and his eyes were so angry that he almost got angry. He cursed angrily in his heart. Okay, you old fox. So you've been hiding inside all this time. I've been carrying it for a long time, and in the end, you've taken all the benefits. If it weren't for my greed for the glory and wealth of the Dali Temple, I would have smeared the case file on your face long ago. And you little rascal, shake and tear down your previous aura. I will definitely not stop you this time. Zhao Tong'er looked over for almost half an hour, and before Wang Chong could speak, he urged, "How are you doing? When will the trial start?" Wang Chong ignored her and looked at the case file in his hand again. This case is actually not complicated, it's just a case reported by a friend. Cheng Su and Zheng Shuang have been good friends for many years and are both merchants. Recently, Cheng Su went to Pingyang town to collect payment. On the 25th of last month, Cheng Su returned home and invited Zheng Shuang to drink. When the two of them were drunk and smoked, Cheng Su told Zheng Shuang something. He went to Pingyang town but didn't receive any money. When he came back, he passed by the place where Nyoto Mountain was about to enter the city and saw a person sitting there resting, with a bulging bag in his wallet. Cheng Su, who was already regretful for not receiving the money, was so upset that he took advantage of the situation and killed the person with a stone. He also cut off the head of the deceased and threw it into the mountain, then pushed the body into a nearby dry well. Zheng Shuang certainly didn't believe it, so Cheng Su showed Zheng Shuang the 50 taels of silver he had stolen. Originally, Zheng Shuang's alcohol had completely awakened, but as he returned home, his thoughts became more and more incorrect. He realized that he could not knowingly report this heinous incident to the government, so he went to report it to the Tongshan County government the next morning. The magistrate of Qian County in Tongshan County, Shijing, received a case and, to be cautious, first instructed the constable to lead people to search for the place mentioned by Cheng Su to see if there were any corpses. Just as everyone thought Cheng Su was drinking too much and boasting, Zheng Shuang heard that the wind was rain. The county constable actually found a dry well in the place where Cheng Su mentioned. In the well, there was a headless male corpse lying, with a fan and a knife next to it. The fan read, "The clear wind and bright moon pass through my heart, and one person walks with the horizontal spring and vertical willow." In such a big case, Tongshan County dared not delay and even hired a grave to examine the body. The result, as Cheng Su said, was that his head was cut off with a sharp blade, and the time of death was also in line. At this point, it becomes very obvious that Cheng Su just drank too much and couldn't stop talking about the matter of seeking wealth and causing harm to his life. But this case has been tried twice in Tongshan County, and Cheng Su refused to sign a confession, claiming that the 50 taels of silver were collected from Taiping town. There's no problem with this case. Wang Chong closed the case file and began to ponder by touching his chin. The motive is clear, the evidence is conclusive, and the case is clear, so there is nothing wrong with this case. If there is a flaw in this case, it is that the head was not found, but as the commentator said, it doesn't matter if the head is not found. But why doesn't Cheng Su recognize it? Zhao Tong'er snorted coldly when she saw Wang Chong saying this. "What did you see, sir?" "There is no doubt about this case," Wang Chong replied angrily, then walked up to Zhou Lai and asked softly, "Mr. Zhou, have all the adults seen this case?" There are clear regulations in the investigation of cases in various prefectures of Dali Temple, which require confirmation from officials at or above the level of 3 temple officials before a case can be concluded. Wang Chong does not want to be a newcomer and cause a deadlock in his colleague's relationship because he tried to solve the case, which would not be worth the loss. So, he needs to seek approval for this matter next week. Whether it's in his past life or present, it's always right to ask the leader more when encountering problems. Zhou Lai has also been struggling in the officialdom for so many years, and when he heard Wang Chong say this, he understood his meaning. He said calmly, "You just need to rest assured to investigate. There is nothing else in Dali Temple, and colleagues are still very united. I will help you with anything." When he said this, without mentioning Wang Chong, Xiang Shaoqing rolled his eyes first. Sir, when you said this from your mouth, why am I so incredulous? But sir, there's no problem with this case. Zhou Lai glanced at the county lord and whispered to Wang Chong, if there's no problem with this case, you also need to review it. Let her take a look, otherwise there will be no peace in the temple. Since the boss is facing difficulties, Wang Chong will help the leader solve the problems. Therefore, at the strong request of the county head, this case was scheduled for a retrial at Shincher tomorrow. Just a few steps out of the Dali Temple, Wang Chong heard someone calling him from behind. Mr. Wang, stay a step. He turned around and saw that it was the green-robed commentator at the door just now. He hurriedly rushed up and bowed to himself, saying, Your Excellency Wang, I have offended you so much today. Please don't take it to heart, Your Excellency. I can't blame you for this. Li Xian arched his hand and said, Your Excellency is so young, with such a broad mind. You are truly a role model for my subordinates to learn from. Your Excellency, I hope for you like a dry field hoping for rain. Today, I finally have you here. When Wang Chong was slapped by the rainbow fart, he felt as if he had eaten ginseng fruit. His 36,000 pores were open, and he was extremely comfortable. Sir, if you have any future matters, just give me orders. Are you going to the Ministry of Personnel now? Yeah, I'll go and return it to you. Sir, why do you need to go to such a small matter in person? I'll just help you go. Is this okay? Li Xian approached Wang Chong and blinked, saying, I have acquaintances, it's a small matter. Since there was a younger brother willing to serve, Wang Chong was certainly happy to save this trip. After handing over the report to Li Xian, he walked towards home with Wang Mu. As we approached Jinchai Bag Lane, a strange song was uploaded from the library www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Sister, in March, hit the vegetable head, hit the vegetable head, hit it. Wang Chong followed the tune and came to a beggar, squatting down and shouting, Little lunatic. The beggar raised his head and looked at Wang Chong's face in confusion for a while. He was pleasantly surprised and said, Xiao Xiucai. You're back, where have you been in the past few days? You haven't finished telling me the story of that monkey yet. This beggar is Wang Chong's first acquaintance in this world after being reborn. He has been stimulated and crazy all day, yet he is still there. It's just that 15 years is just a few days in his eyes, and there's nothing he can do. Is he crazy? Come on, buy you Xiaobing, baked cake and griddle, to eat. Wang Yu took out some copper coins and put them in the hands of the beggar. I will tell you stories next time. The little madman took the money, stretched out his hands in vain, led his imaginary sister, and hopped towards the road. Oh, sister, my brother will take you to buy Xiaobing, baked cake and griddle, to eat. Little lunatic, come to my house to play when you have time. There are ghosts in your house, there are many ghosts, I won't go. Wang Yu watched the little madman's back for a while before turning his head and continuing to walk towards the alley with Wang Mu. The alley is secluded and long, with several flowers flipping out, like a little girl lying on the wall curiously looking at strangers passing by. Bamboo sticks scratched the moss-covered wall, making a thumping sound, adding a touch of liveliness to the quiet alley. Suddenly, the bamboo stick stopped and the sound came to a sudden halt. Young master, what's wrong? Wang Chong gently tapped the wall with a bamboo stick and muttered to himself, he shouldn't be like this, it doesn't make sense. Young master, are you saying there's a problem with that case? I didn't originally have it, but now I have a little. Let's discuss it tomorrow after the review. Chapter 7. Injustice must have a head. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, on the 5th day of the Lunar New Year, in the Inner Palace, Yuhua Pavilion in the majestic depths of the Imperial Palace, the room of the most powerful person in the Southern Chen dynasty was far less imposing than the territory under his jurisdiction. Cigarettes curled up from the lotus-shaped aroma, soaring upwards, and the sunlight passed through the window lattice, casting a heat in with the light. A fish, a bowl of chitsai, a soup, and a small plate with a few cakes. In addition, there is also a stack of memorials on the short table. Emperor Chun of the Southern Chen dynasty was wearing a black regular uniform, with a white jade hairpin inserted into his bun. Holding a cake in one hand and a memorial in the other, I am looking at it. He sat casually on the couch like this, but the aura on his body made the attendants around him dare not take a breath. Your Majesty, the Marquis of Zhenbei. At this moment, the Grand Internal Attendant Jia Cheng walked in and leaned down to say softly. Emperor Yongqing took a bite of the cake and slowly chewed it. Without leaving the memorial, he slowly said, "What's wrong with him? He fell asleep. What kind of nonsense is all this written about?" Emperor Yongqing tilted his lips slightly, as if he had guessed the ending. He threw the memorial on the bed and waved his hand, "Let him get in." Jia Cheng turned around and walked away, then a loud voice came from the outside in. "Your Majesty, my goddaughter has no way out. She deserves to die for her crimes." A sturdy figure rushed into the inner hall from the outside of the pavilion with a loud thud, kneeling on the ground with its head stuck to the ground. It just kept saying, "My goddaughter has no way, she deserves to die 1,000 times. Emperor Yongqing lifted his eyelids and said lightly. "Speak up, keep going. I asked you to read more books in your daily life, and that's why you learned these 2 sentences. As a soldier and soldier, what kind of scholar would you learn? Why would you apologize? Oh, you knelt down for less than a quarter of an hour, and you even fell asleep. I think you deserve to die." Speaking, Emperor Yongqing picked up a knife from the couch and walked towards the Marquis of Zhenbei. Upon seeing this, the Marquis of Zhenbei's face was greatly shocked. He knelt back and shouted, "Your Majesty, this is a disaster caused by a child. The disaster is not as great as that of his parents. You must be reasonable." Emperor Yongqing was stunned for a moment, then smiled instead of getting angry. "You're okay to say the word reason, you're okay to say it. Look at how you've taught Tong Er. She dares to smash the Dali Temple in the court. When will she come and smash my inner palace?" As he spoke, Emperor Yongqing suddenly pulled out his sword and walked step by step towards the Marquis of Zhenbei. "If a woman doesn't teach, it's your responsibility. It's you who I'm looking for," he said. The Marquis of Zhenbei looked at the dazzling blade and was so frightened that his already short beard stood up one by one. His eyes were wide open, and he shouted with his hands blocking the front, "Hey, Your Majesty, you're really here, Your Majesty, Big Brother." Bang dang, the knife was thrown to the ground by Emperor Yongqing. "If it weren't for you calling me Big Brother today, I would have chopped you down with one knife." Emperor Yongqing glared at the Marquis of Zhenbei with anger and pointed to the knife on the ground, saying, "This is the 100 refined treasure sword just presented by the inner palace. I have chosen a good one and taken it. You have been working hard in the north for these years. Ah. It's not hard, it's very refreshing." The Marquis of Zhenbei wiped off the non-existent sweat on his head and picked up the precious knife in his hand, unable to put it down. "This knife is really good, it looks fast." Emperor Yongqing sat back on the collapse, picked up the soup bowl and took a sip, saying, "At that time, I should have let Tong Er stay by Empress Dowager Da's side. Look, after going north with you, what's going on? You think I don't know? She can hit whatever she wants in Shijing City. Look, this doesn't sound like what a county lord said. Your Majesty, let's make this clear. Tong Er, you and Consort Da are more favored than me. Last time. What are you saying? What I spoil, it's all my fault," said the Marquis of Zhenbei, pointing at the table with a smile. "Your Majesty, scabbard." Emperor Yongqing threw the scabbard from his hand onto the Marquis of Zhenbei and said, "In a few days, let Tong Er come and stay with Consort Da for a while. Do you understand?" "Got it, to avoid the limelight, it's just like we went to my second brother's house back then." Speaking of second brother, Emperor Yongqing and Marquis Zhenbei both quieted down. At this moment, time went wrong and solidified in this small attic. Watching the beautiful scene on the side, Jia Cheng, who had always been quiet, had a twitch in his eyelids. His eyes, which seemed to have no emotions forever, finally had a slight fluctuation and he looked deeply towards the Marquis of Zhenbei. Get lost. After the Marquis of Zhenbei left, Chen Perlin's face suddenly darkened and he walked back and forth in the pavilion. After a long time, he said in a deep voice. Jia Cheng, invite the imperial city envoy. Here it is. In the Dali Temple, the candlelight sways and Bayan gazes. The 2 rows of Yamen officials, the clerks in the case room behind the desk, and the people standing in the hall all looked quietly at the person sitting in the hall wearing a green robe and a blue tassel hat, not daring to take a breath. Zhao Tong'er sat at the back of the hall, separated by a painted wall, quietly listening to the interrogation in the outer hall. In the classroom, Zheng Shuangzheng was talking about the events of the day in detail, and there was no difference from the case file. After he finished speaking, Wang Yu's fingers, which were constantly tapping on the table, stopped and asked the Criminal Investigation Department of Tongshan County, what did the merchant in Taiping Town say? Lord Hui, the merchant owner has purchased goods and said he will not be back until over a month later, replied the prison warden respectfully. Oh, did someone recognize the corpse? On the day we found the body in our county, a notice was posted and someone had come to claim it. The deceased were Tang De, his mother Tang Lu, and his wife Tang Pan. They were waiting in the hall. When Wang Chong saw Tang Pan's first glance, he exclaimed in his heart, what a beautiful woman, with pear blossoms and rain, I still pity her. Tang Pan, how old are you this year? Wang Chong squinted at Tang Pan and asked with a smile. Tang Pan timidly replied, I have 1 in 20 this year. Pretty good, pretty good. Wang Chong couldn't help but walk down the hall, circling around Tang Pan. With a nod, wearing filial piety clothes and white flowers on his head, he matched his shy appearance. TSK 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 TSK, there was Lady Shen in front, and Tang Pan in the back. How could these little widows be more and more tempting each time? That corpse has no head, how did you recognize it as your husband? Tang Pan lowered her head and shyly replied softly, my husband and I have been married for 2 years, so we must be very familiar with each other. Oh, I understand, I understand. Wang Chongchang exclaimed and playfully glanced at Tang Pan a few more times. My son said that someone was looking for him to do a business, but he never expected to be killed by criminals. He begged the old master to make the decision for the common woman. Tang Lu's mournful cry pulled Wang Chong back from his imagination and turned to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. It's you, the good old man who killed me. I'll fight with you. Speaking, Tang Lusher stood up and waved his hand towards Ching Su with a grim expression. Ching Su was wearing ankle shackles and handcuffs, making it difficult for him to move, so he could only shrink his head and allow the old lady to beat and scold him. Tang Pancher, on the other hand, lowered his head and sobbed, while small pearls dripped down in chains, making Wang Chong's heart break. Pull it apart, what kind of behavior is it? Wang Chong quickly commanded the Yamen to separate the two. Let me tell you, it's against the law to hit people. Do you think this Dali Temple is where you throw tantrums? Tang Lusher wiped away her tears and sat on the ground, vigorously pushing Tang Pancher's leg. You broom star, why don't you help me up? Wang Chong saw everything in his eyes, sat back in the court, and had the bookstore hold a knife and fan in front of Ching Su. Ching Su, look at this knife and fan, they belong to you. Ching Su stretched his head to look at the items on the plate and replied, I am wrongly accused. I have never seen that fan before, and that knife belongs to me. But after I returned, I disappeared. Sir, I am wrongly accused. I did not rob money. The owner of that shop in Pinyin Town can testify for me. When he looked at the evidence, although Wang Chong was peeling his fingernails, his eyes kept staring at him. Seeing him say this, he blew his fingers and said, even if the boss of Pinyin Town testifies to you, what if he pays you for the goods, won't you kill and rob again? Is there still someone in the world who hates money? Why bother? The villain is wronged, by the way, the human head has not been found. Cheng Su shouted as if he had found a life-saving straw, the human head has not been found, the villain is not convinced. Okay, I'll go find Tang Da's head and make you give up. Wang Chong knocked on the startled wood and said, step back. Chapter 8. Then go to hell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the next day, Nyoto Mountain. Wang Chong sat under a tree, holding a piece of grass in his hand, and the bamboo stick in his hand hit the ground one by one. Surrounding him are over 30 Yamen officials from Dali Temple and Tongshan County, searching for the whereabouts of human heads from the dry well. Since Cheng Su had to see the human head before giving up, Wang Chong had to satisfy him. At this moment, Wang Mu walked over with two people. Sir, Zheng Shuang and Tang Pan are here. Wang Chong raised his head and looked at the two of them in confusion, asking, what are you doing here? Sir, Zheng Shuangbiao, Wang Chong, bowed and said, Cheng Su is a friend of a petty person. I am also very sad to have committed such a thing. I want to do my best to help find the person's head, so that Tang Da will not be separated. Let's consider it as a friend's redemption. Please, Sir and Mrs. Tang, be complete. After speaking, Zheng Shuangqiao and Tang Pan made a deep bow, and Tang Pan leaned slightly to let go. Mr. Zheng has a heart, sir. I must find the head of the Prime Minister and let him fall into the ground completely. Otherwise, I will have difficulty sleeping and eating, and I will ask for your permission. Wang Chong nodded and said to Wang Mu, both of you are kind-hearted people. Wang Mu, take both of you to look for them. You must ensure their safety. After the three of them left, Wang Chong walked to the edge of the dry well where the body was found, and stretched his head down. This dry well is less than 2 zhang deep, with a broken edge and a bottom filled with leaves, dry grass, and broken stones. He was mesmerized as he leaned his head out from the side and said, what are you looking at? Wang Chong was so frightened that he trembled all over. With just one swift step, he jumped aside and said to the speaker, County Lord, you walk silently. How dare you enter the Dali Temple with such cowardice? Zhao Tong'er wore a thin veil on her face, unable to see the expression on her face, but her tone could tell that she was very contemptuous of Wang Chong. Wang Chong took a sniff and said, County Lord, solving a case depends on your brain, not your courage. Did you find anything? Zhao Tong'er spoke while using his scabbard to poke the weeds near the well, hoping to discover some clues. County Lord, may I ask what month it is now? June, what's wrong? Wang Chong pointed to the grass from the bamboo stick and said, this case occurred on the 25th of last month, more than 10 days ago, and there was also rain in the middle. Even if there were some traces, they were washed away by the rain. And now it is June, and the grass is growing fast. Finding evidence here is like carving a boat and seeking a sword. Zhao Tong'er felt a bit unnatural when she heard Wang Chong say this, but how could her personality be something that Wang Chong could easily listen to with just a few words? Ener, don't listen to him, let's find it ourselves, she said to Sang Yin behind her, County Lord, be careful of snakes. You are delicate and expensive, and getting a bite won't be good. Upon hearing the presence of a snake, Sang Yin approached Zhao Tong'er and timidly said, County Lord, there are snakes. Although Zhao Tong'er is usually notorious, she is still a woman and a girl who is very afraid of snakes. When Wang Chong said there is a snake, she was already 3 times afraid in her heart. However, she persisted and said, what are you afraid of? If there is a snake, I will cut it with a knife. County Lord, don't blame me for not reminding you. If you're bitten by a snake, you're going to use drugs. I won't do it then. Wang Chong found a flat place, touched a stone, and quietly threw it next to Zhao Tong'er, shouting, there's a snake. Zhao Tong'er was frightened by the commotion in the grass, her face turning pale. She jumped and swung a knife at her feet, while Sang Yin sat down on the grass, her handsome face already turning pale from fear. "Miss, help me, my legs are weak." Wang Chong turned his head to one side and kept shrugging his shoulders. "Make you naughty and arrogant, be afraid." At this moment, an excited shout came from a distance. "Found it, the head has been found." Wang Chong stood up and walked towards the sound, while Zhao Tong'er also grabbed Sang Yin and followed Wang Chong. The human head was discovered in a grassy pit. After more than 10 days of wind and sun exposure, the entire head had begun to rot and had not been eaten by wild animals. It was still well preserved, but the smell made several yamen servants vomit uncontrollably. But what surprised Wang Chong a bit was that Zhao Tong'er and Sang Yin, who were even afraid of a snake, did not show much fear on their faces except for covering their mouths and noses. Xiangong, Tang Pan also rushed over and just glanced at the person's head before falling to the ground and crying loudly. Zheng Shuang stood aside with a mournful expression on his face. Wang Chong asked, "Mrs. Tang, have you recognized her clearly?" "Xiangong has a mole on his face." Tang Pan looked back and couldn't help but vomit when he saw the decaying head. "Amu, give it a try." Wang Mu responded and took out the tools for the grave from his arms. He walked over to the person's head and began to examine them. The incense stuck on the ground was only burned halfway, and Wang Mu finished inspecting the head. He clenched his fists and said to Wang Chong, "Sir, the rest of the head is undamaged, and the cut is flat. It was cut off by someone with a sharp blade, and he died for about 10 days or more. All of this is as written on the case file. Zhaoshuyuan.com, no scars on the face." "No, sir." Wang Chong frowned and waved his bamboo stick. "Got it, go back to the yamen." Dali Temple Prison. A foul smell permeated the prison, which was a mixture of moisture and excrement that had been present for years, making Zhao Tong'er's nose very uncomfortable. "Miss, it smells so bad here." Yin Er covered her mouth and nose, feeling puzzled. "Miss, what kind of prison are you in? It smells so bad." Zhao Tong'er gave her a reproachful glare, then shifted his attention to Wang Chong and Ching Su kneeling in front of him. "Ching Su, do you know this person's head?" Trembling, Ching Su lifted his head and glanced at the people in the tray before retreating and shaking his head, saying, "I don't know." "Okay, Ching Su, to be honest with you, in this case, we have all the necessary human and material evidence. Now that the head has been found, no matter who you are looking for, you cannot escape. The villain is unjustly accused. Ching Su, I have just taken office and I also want to handle the case. If you agree, I will cut off a fight for you. You don't have to die, do you think it's okay?" "Sir, although I am a businessman, I have also studied for several years. If I have done it, I have done it. If I have not done it, I have not done it. I cannot recognize this case. What's the use of being so stubborn? You need to think for your family. If you don't recognize it, I can still judge it. If you recognize it, there is still a way to survive. Lose some money, exile 3,000 miles, and at least there will be a moment to reunite with your family. I don't recognize it." Wang Chonghua stood up and pointed his bamboo stick at Ching Su, saying, "I have shown some kindness, but you haven't made any progress. Alright, then go to hell." Chapter 9. Give money, I'll teach you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Punish him, sir. Under severe punishment, there is no room for him not to admit. Wang Mu, who returned to the office, gave Wang Chong an idea. Wang Chongbai glanced at him and said, "This court is cautious of punishment. He admitted to beating him today, but tomorrow he will retract his confession and say that we were forced to resort to punishment. Do you think your master is both talented and beautiful, charming, jealous of me, and has set me up a trap. You said you've been with me for so long, so how can you remember to use punishment? Look at their Sang Yin, they all work as attendants, and how can there be such a big gap between people? As Wang Chongqiao spoke, Sang Yin, who was standing next to Zhao Tong'er, glanced at her, only to receive a white eye from her. Who is the attendant? This silly big guy is the attendant. I am the county lord's maid. This maid looks ordinary, but she is also a little chili pepper, and Zhao Tong'er's reputation also includes her significant contribution value. Wang Chong finished his flowery speech and said to Zhao Tong'er, County Lord, the head has also been found, but Ching Su doesn't recognize it. You can't say that Dali Temple is wrong now, can you? Since coming out of prison, Zhao Tong'er has been very confused in her heart. The case is now very clear, and the person's head was also brought back by her watching. Just now, this little official talked about that. Why doesn't Ching Su recognize it? She really wanted to say that Ching Su should die, but when it came to her mouth, it turned into, anyway, I don't think it's right, there's a problem. County Lord, the case is judged based on evidence, not just because you said there were problems. What you said at the door that day was great. What is the principle of the law? Life is of paramount importance. You also watched the trial of this case. So, what's wrong with you? What are the problems? Zhao Tong'er's heart was empty, but her mouth was hard. I don't know. If it weren't for the county lord, you would have been beaten to death for being stubborn. Wang Chong thought to himself and reached out his hand in front of Zhao Tong'er, give me the money, I'll tell you where the problem is. Are you saying that Ching Su is not the murderer? Wang Chong nodded lightly and said, no, 50 liang, I'll teach you. Wang Mu's admiration for Wang Chong deepened in his heart. The young master is really amazing, even in the hands of the Lord of Ping and County, he can make money. I admire him. I'll give you the money. If you don't convince me, these 50 liang will be your medicine expenses. Looking at Wang Chong's despicable way of collecting money, Zhao Tong'er felt a wave of displeasure in her heart. However, there was no way she could do it. Wang Chong's words tickled her itch, and if she didn't pay, her curiosity couldn't bear it. Wang Chong collected the money and raised a finger, asking, let me ask a question. If you were Ching Su, how would you choose between death and exile? That's needless to say, definitely choose exile, Zhao Tong'er said disdainfully. Wang Chong moved his finger to Sang Yin and Wang Mu, and their answer was the same. Choose exile. Okay, that's the question. Why did Ching Su choose to die? The three of them were stunned. It was a simple question, but everyone had been paying attention to the head and evidence, and never thought about why Ching Su wanted to die and not confess. As the county lord said on the same day, my court is cautious in punishment and killing. Apart from conspiring against others, those who commit incest are rarely sentenced to death. Every autumn, there are only a few people sentenced to death. If Ching Su wanted to survive, he could have said that he was killed by mistake or due to a fight of anger, and then cut off the head of the deceased for fear of trouble, which would result in exile at most. When he was in court that day and refused to confess, I had some doubts. If it's really him who did it, it's better to admit it honestly and find a better lawyer to say that he was killed by mistake, fighting, and still managed to save his life. Not admitting guilt, having complete personal and material evidence, but the result is death. He's not cost-effective like this. Zhao Tong'er scratched her head and said, maybe he's just biting and not letting go. If the head is not found, then Ching Su can still be considered lucky, but the head is in front of him, and I have said that as long as he agrees, he will spare his life. He still refuses to agree. This is not to say he won't let go. What if he's the kind of person with a single mind? Wang Chong glanced at Zhao Tong'er and thought to himself, not everyone is just as skilled as you are, and you have always said that Ching Su is innocent. Why did you take advantage of him now? But after all, Zhao Tong'er is the county lord, and Wang Chong cannot confront him directly. After thinking for a moment, he asked. County lord, may I ask if you are so chivalrous now? Will you change in the future? Of course not. Wang Chong tapped the ground with a bamboo stick and said. If Ching Su refuses to confess his guilt because he harbors a sense of luck, how could a person with such a firm will, such cruel methods, and such meticulous thoughts possibly reveal things to others due to drunkenness, and even reveal the truth? Just like the county lord, can you steal something? Young master, do you mean that Ching Su is not the murderer? No, it's not. Zhao Tong'er quickly asked, who is the murderer then? Wang Chong reached out his hand and said, this question is 100 taels. As she walked out of the door of Dali Temple, Sang Yin pulled Zhao Tong'er's sleeve and said, Miss, we were deceived by him. Did he deceive us? Didn't he say we'll know after a few days? Sang Yin stomped her foot and approached Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, saying, Oh miss, we don't actually need to give him money. He handled this case, and he will definitely reveal who the culprit was in the end. Zhao Tong'er was right when he thought about it. He is an official of the Dali Temple, and handling cases is only natural. Why do we need to give him extra money? She was about to kill her back, but on second thought, she couldn't do it. If someone found out that I had been cheated 150 taels by him in this way, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? Is money important for the county's reputation? Thinking of this, Zhao Tong'er stomped her foot and said to Sang Yin, in the future, if we find an opportunity to beat him up, this money should be used to pay for his soup and medicine in advance. Go back to the mansion. Young master, who exactly is the culprit? I don't know either. Wang Chong shook the bamboo stick on his hand and said. He can already confirm that Ching Su is not the culprit, so who is the real culprit? What is the method of killing, and what is his motive? Wang Chong had a rough idea in his mind, but he always felt that the most crucial link was missing. There is another question, Wang Chong has never figured it out. Killing is not killing a chicken. When he is so nervous, why bother to cut off the head of a person? It's better to make people unable to recognize the deceased, strip off their clothes, and destroy their appearance. Or simply set it on fire. But the clothes on the deceased's body were intact, and the head was not injured. The dry well was still so shallow that there was no indication of the killer's intention to destroy the body. So what was the purpose of chopping off the head? Is it a ritual? What did the white clothes sect do? I haven't heard of such a ceremony in the white clothes sect either. Just as he was lost in thought, he suddenly felt his thighs being hugged, and a childlike voice rang from his feet. Grandpa, please be kind and give me something to eat. Chapter 10. The story of Journey to the West is ordered. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Wang Chong lowered his head and saw a little girl holding his leg, eagerly looking at him. A dirty little hand was lifted in mid-air. The little beggar looked 5 or 6 years old, not yet as tall as Wang Chong's waist. He was dressed in fat and tattered clothes, with bare feet and sparse hair draped around him. His small face had a pair of lifeless big eyes. The little beggar, seeing Wang Chong staring at him, was so scared that he let go of Wang Chong's leg, but his little hand was still raised. Wang Chong had an aura that scared her. She was very scared, but she was even hungry. Hunger was more terrifying than anything else. Grandpa, give me something to eat. When Wang Chong saw the little beggar, it was like seeing himself from the past. At that time, he and Wang Mu were also like this. The two of them were really hungry, so they went to the street to beg for food, held someone else's thigh, stretched out their hands, and even said the same thing. Wang Chong took out a small piece of silver from his waist, squatted down, and put it in the hands of the little beggar. Take it. The little beggar took the silver and looked at it. What is this? Can it be eaten? He then stuffed the silver into his mouth. Alas, this can't be eaten. Wang Chong took the little beggar's hand, smiled at her with his mildest smile, and said, "This is silver. It's worth more than copper. You can buy a lot of xiaobing, baked cake and griddle." "Thank you, sir. Your wealth has been abundant, and you have been a duke and marquis for generations." The little beggar hobbled towards the street corner with money, and stumbled on his pants in the middle. Just as Wang Chong was about to walk over to help her, the little beggar himself got up from the ground. There were several beggars in the corner, and the oldest one was only 10 years old. A big child took the silver from a young beggar's hand, bit it with his teeth, and didn't know what to say. The little beggars cheered loudly, then gathered together and ran towards the distance. "This is a refugee from the north." After speaking, Wang Mu took a step forward and whispered, "Young master, someone is following us." Wang Chong watched as the group of little beggars disappeared at the street corner, then waved his bamboo stick and said, "Let's go home." After they left, the two people dressed in blue withdrew their gaze from the street vendor, exchanged a glance, put down their drink money, and rushed downstairs. "Young master, should I go?" Wang Mu made a gesture and squinted his eyes, saying. "Don't imitate me." Wang Chong picked up a bamboo stick and tapped him on the head, saying, "Just be careful. This is the capital city. You think it's a rural area like Jingzhou, and besides, I'm an official." Wang Chong pulled a chair and placed it under the eaves, looking at the pomegranate trees in the courtyard and shaking a fan. "Who is tracking me? Is that shipment of goods from Jingzhou so bold? I'll blackmail you for some money, as for chasing them to Beijing. Others say it's a tumultuous autumn, but this is only summer. Why do things continue one by one? And that unlucky case, which bastard did it? In which episode did Conan mention this? Let me recall it carefully." Wang Chongzheng closed his eyes and reminisced about the cartoons he had watched in his past life when a voice came from the door. Xiao Xiuzai. Wang Chong looked towards the door, and the little madman was poking his head out of the door and waving at him. "Little lunatic, come find me to play. Come in." The little madman shook his head like a tambourine and said in terror, "I won't come in. Your ghost is really fierce." Wang Chong had no choice but to go to the door, took out some copper coins and said, "Here, buy xiaobing, baked cake and griddle, to eat." The little madman shook his head again and said, "The money you gave me last time hasn't been used up yet. I'll listen to your story, the story of Monkey Sunday." "Oh, all right." Wang Chong looked around and sat on the threshold. There is a land overseas called Aolai country. The country is near the sea, and there is a mountain in the sea called Huagua Mountain. I've talked about it before. The great sage immediately revealed his true form, pulling out a golden cudgel in his ear and making a pretense. The bowl was thick and thin, and he exclaimed in a loud voice, "Which monster are you? Dare you dare to steal my peach? I've talked about it too." Wang Chong was taken aback for a moment. He looked at the little madman and thought to himself, "Are you really crazy or fake crazy? You remember things 15 years ago so clearly," so he asked, "Then tell me where I went." The little madman tilted his head for a moment, thought for a moment, and counted his fingers, saying, "The great sage is born, worships his master, goes to the dragon palace, the underworld, and becomes the prime minister of the heavenly palace, and then causes a commotion in the heavenly palace." "Didn't you go to the underworld first?" "No, it's going to the dragon palace first and then to the underworld with weapons." The little madman corrected Wang Chong's words seriously. After causing a commotion in the heavenly palace, he was pinned down on Wuji Mountain by the Tathagata Buddha. Later, Tang Monk saved him. The little madman recalled the plot of Journey to the West and kept gesturing to Sun Wukong. Wang Chong smiled happily, all of which he had taught the little madman before. He didn't expect him to remember so clearly. With a smile, Wang Chong's face became solemn and his eyes narrowed. He stood up and stuffed a few copper coins into the little lunatic's hand, saying, little lunatic, I have something else to do today. I'll play with you again next time. Oh, then you will remember tomorrow. The little madman looked into the door, then stretched out his hand, held the non-existent person, and said, Sister, brother will take you to buy xiaobing, baked cake in griddle, to eat. Sister beat vegetables in March. Wang Chong walked quickly into the room and unfolded the files of the Chengsu case. He looked at them carefully, as if a light had appeared in his heart, making the blurry and unclear details of the case appear. No wonder we had to chop off the head, it turned out we had to. Chengsu, you're biting your head so hard that you didn't expect to save your own life. It's really destined in the dark. One question comes to mind, and another question arises. Why is this person doing this? What is their motivation, seeking wealth? Why did Tang De die instead of someone else? Did you randomly find an unlucky ghost? No. This kind of opportunity is rare. Tang De should have been deliberately chosen by this person, and there must be a connection between them. AMU, young master, what can I do to find the Shuyuan? www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Stop eating and come squatting with me. The Marquis of Zhenbei looked at Zhao Tong'er standing in front of him and let out a deep sigh. As he was about to lift his hand, he let it down again and said, Tong'er, can you also smash the Dali Temple? Your Majesty is so angry, you and I almost got chopped down by him. Dad, are you okay then? It's okay, Your Majesty is kind. Just curse a few words and it'll be okay. Look, Your Majesty even gave me a precious sword. As he spoke, the Marquis of Zhenbei placed his precious sword on the table. Zhao Tong'er stepped forward and drew out the sword, envious. Dad, this knife is really good. There are patterns on it, and it looks like a versatile treasure sword. That's right. At that time, I knew it was a good knife. If you didn't say anything else, just look at it and swallow it, said the Marquis of Zhenbei, pausing and changing into a serious expression. What kind of knife? Tell me about your affairs. Your Majesty has said that you should go to the palace to accompany your aunt these days. I won't go. I still have to go to the trial with that little official. After the trial, I'll go back. I gave him 150 taels of silver. Which official? What silver should I give? Marquis Zhenbei feels a bit chaotic. What's going on in this world? Why does his daughter give silver to court officials? Which colleague is so brave? That's the person named Wang Chong, the new magistrate of Dali Temple. He tried that case. It seems that Shen Ming's case was also decided by him. It's quite interesting. Wang Chong. The abbot of Dali Temple. The Marquis of Zhenbei muttered the name of Wang Chong in his mouth, and a person appeared in his mind. His face turned gloomy as he pointed at Zhao Tong'er and said sternly, Stay away from him. Go to the palace for me immediately tomorrow.